This is TARHEEL Talk, an in-depth look at the issues and people making news in North Carolina. Here's your host, Sonia Williams.
For many decades, the United Nations has made significant progress in gender equality and human rights for women around the world. Now, a North Carolina group is joining the fight. WomenNC is a nonprofit organization headquartered in Raleigh that works to develop young women leaders to address global issues. Joining me now to tell us more is Beth Dagan, founder and executive director of WomenNC, and Anuja Achara, 2012 Commission on the Status of Women Fellow. Thank you both so much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Beth, you created WomenNC back in 2009, and it is connected to the United Nations. Tell us a little bit about why you created this organization here in our state.
Sure. Before I came to North Carolina in 1998 with my husband and our two daughters, I used to live in the Middle East, in Europe, Canada, and many parts of the United States. And in general, human rights, and in particular women's rights, always have been my passion. And it didn't last long for me in my new home, North Carolina, to see that there is a common denominator between all the issues that women are facing throughout the world and also here in North Carolina. So it didn't last long that I just continued my activities as a human rights and women's rights activist in North Carolina. And then I started this new organization called North Carolina Committee for CSW and CEDA, which was called later WomenNC. And WomenNC is rooted in women's human rights, and it has been originated from Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations, and also at CEDA, which stands for Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Mm-hmm. This is an international treaty. It is like a constitution to women's rights globally. And 187 countries around the world, they have signed this treaty at the global level. And there are just 7 of them that they have not signed this treaty, and United States is one of them.
Right, right. And I know that you're working to get the United States to ratify the treaty.
Yes, there is a grassroots movement around the nation. There are many, many organizations and women's rights activists that they are trying to persuade United States Senate to just introduce this treaty to the floor and then make sure that there is a 67 vote in favor of this treaty at the United States Senate. And we are part of that coalition. The headquarters of the coalition is in Washington, D.C., called CEDA Task Force, and we are part of that campaign. And it's not just a matter of having our senators to sign this treaty, but it is a matter of educating the member of our community about the importance of this treaty, about the importance of women's human rights. Because in North Carolina, 51% of the population are women, and but they are underrepresented in public and private sectors. And according to Association of American University Women, there is a 71% wage gap for college-educated women in North Carolina. So there is a room to bring the women's issues to our public, to educate them, because and relate those issues to this international treaty, CEDA, because CEDA talks about all aspects of women's human rights.
And this international treaty was created back in 1979. So why hasn't the United States ratified this treaty?
Well, there are some stereotype aspect about the treaty, unfortunately, in the United States. Anita Sivakumar, our president, has done extensive research on CEDAW, and I think she would be able also to talk in more detail. But they feel like this treaty is just about women's reproductive right, which is not. According to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, CEDAW is like a abortion-free treaty. It doesn't talk about reproductive right at all. It just talks in general about women's human rights. And also, they feel like that there are some anti-family concept in this treaty, which is not the fact, because it talks about family values. It talks about the women's human rights for choosing about the number of children that she wants. And so, unfortunately, it hasn't been introduced to the Senate floor yet. And there were some conservative people at the Senate, at the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate, that they prevented the introducing the treaty to the Senate floor.
Okay. Well, now I know part of the work with WomenNC is to provide scholarships and sponsorships to college women so that they can attend the United Nations Conference on the Status of Women, Commission on the Status of Women. And Anuja is one of the 2012 fellows. Anuja, tell us a little bit about your research and your project. I know you're a senior at NC State with a double major, political science and English. Tell us a little bit about the project that you chose to do.
All right, well, the CSW's theme for 2012 is the empowerment of rural women. Now, I decided to study the political participation of rural women in North Carolina. And as Beth said, part of WomenNC's mission is to understand that problems that affect women in North Carolina also affect women across the United States and globally as well. So I decided to study how rural women in North Carolina are able to run for office and are active in the political process. Now, as you know, only about 17% of legislators around the world are women. Only 17% of the U.S. Congress is composed of women, and only 25% of the General Assembly is composed of women. So I wanted to see, what it is that gets rural women involved in governance and politics so that they, along with, even urban women, can put out a better showing in lawmaking bodies. So I partnered with Lillians List, which is an organization that helps specific women candidates run for office, and they support rural women running for office in financial ways. They help with training for campaigns, and they connect them to resources that they might not otherwise have.
Okay. What are some of the findings that you uncovered during your research? Because I know a lot of times in rural communities, resources are an issue. Were there any other issues that you uncovered?
Well, having a network really helps when you're looking to run for political office. And in rural communities, there's just a smaller network. Maybe the network is just small community-based or church-based or school-based. But there are a few wide-spanning networks, and those are the ones that tend to be the most effective in getting women elected to political positions. So one thing that Lillian's List does is they give these rural women access to this larger political network.
And but also I would like to add here that you are absolutely right. Our student this year, they had a difficult time to find resources and data and statistics about the rural women in North Carolina. In general, always there is a great need for a study and data collection on the status of women globally, nationally, And locally and specifically, we had a hard time to find statistics and resources about the situation of women in rural areas of North Carolina, in political participation, in the women and health, different subjects.
Right.
Yes.
Now, Anuja, why did you decide to get involved and apply for this fellowship?
Well, I've always been very aware of the plight of women around the world, and I've always been very aware that, a lot of the problems women face globally that we hear about, women face in North Carolina as well. So I really liked the mission of WomenNC and how it comes with the understanding that local problems are also national problems, are also global problems. I wanted to approach this specific topic with my research because I grew up in North Carolina, so I've always had strong women political role models. I've always been able to look up to Kay Hagan. I've always been able to look up to Elaine Marshall. And so I was thinking about how the reason I've had these role models is because in North Carolina these women have been successful in running for public office. And I'd like to see that on a national level and on a global level as well. I want to see more women in public office, and I want to see these women be role models for other young girls that might run for public office themselves one day.
Excellent. Now, Anuja and other fellows are going to be presenting their research and their findings a little bit later this month. Give us quickly the details on that.
Yes, on February 16, 5 university women from NC State, UNC, and Meredith College will present their research topics about the different aspects of lives of rural women in North Carolina at the NC State Faculty Club at 5:30.
Okay, and people can find out more information about that by going to your website, WomenNC.org. We're going to have to take a break. Anuja, thank you so much for sharing your work with us, and we'll talk more with you, Beth, a little bit later in the show.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, we meet another CSW fellow and hear her take on women and community health systems in our state. TARHEEL Talk will continue after these messages. WomenNC is an organization working to bring awareness to issues affecting women around the world. One project of WomenNC is to offer scholarships, sponsorships, and mentoring for female college students to attend the annual United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, or CSW, conference. And joining me now is 2012 CSW fellow Abby Bouchon. Also with us is Anita Sivakumar, president of WomenNC. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, Anita, in addition to being president of WomenNC, you were also a 2010 CSW fellow. Tell us a little bit about why you got involved with the program to begin with and why you've maintained your relationship thus far.
I've always been looking for a way to kind of find